that you younger people have ever experienced. And, I have to tell you, none of us in this country have grown up in an atmosphere of anything but war. But you all have grown up in a period of unending warfare. There's not been a day in your lives that there's not been a war. And so we'll talk about that. Yusef and I, we're from the Vietnam generation. That was a different thing. This is worse. But we'll explain. You mind if I'll just read part of this article from this morning in the New York. Well, why don't we introduce ourselves first? We got some new people here. They said where you from.
Okay. My name's John. I'm from Indiana. I'm visiting right now. And thank you for having me.
Andrew, I live in West Philly, but I'm also from Indiana originally.
Yusef, Flo.
From North Philly.
Love.
From where?
From around the way.
North Philly.
Yeah, North Philly.
Go ahead.
Bo, I'm from Germantown. Hey.
Packing out from Germany.
Emil, I'm also from Germantown.
I'm also from Germantown.
I didn't know that.
I'm Arthur. I'm from Roxborough
And
originally from Baltimore.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I'm Jacob from what? No, Germantown.
Yeah, I'm Tony. I'm from North Philly. Okay, we'll talk more about the free school and the thing we want to focus upon in this period, because it is something new happening. And so we want to, people are going to be coming in late all the time, but we want to pay close attention to what is going on in the world, and ultimately we want to ask what is to be done and what can we do. All right, and this is just the article. The title of the article is, New York Times regular bullshit. Crisis of revenge is coming at funerals for slain commander in Iraq. You know that Qasem Soleimani, the major general in the Iranian army, specifically the Revolutionary Guard and the Quds formation in that, a legendary figure throughout the Middle East among Shia and Sunni Muslims. In a cowardly act, the United States killed him. He was not hiding from them. And it was not just a killing of a man, it was an attack upon the Iranian state. A figure of, a figure of that magnitude, when you attack, that's me. When he is attacked, it's like attacking one of the highest government officials in this country. That would be considered an attack upon the state and would be treated as such. Furthermore, under international law, even the most, in times of war, seldom, if ever, do the belligerent armies target the heads of state of those countries. For example, in World War II, even though the United States was at war with Germany and with Japan, they did not target the heads of state. They are protected under international law, and the assumption being that after belligerencies, both sides come together and can negotiate a post-war peace. But the United States, being a rogue regime, in the classic sense as defined by international law, has no boundaries. And just parenthetically, I think they're going to pay a heavy price for this. The world will not accept it. So, let me just read this. And you know, if you look at any of the news, and I don't know if y'all look at cable news, you don't have to, I mean, unless you're prepared to be brainwashed. But you know, all of this hand clapping and celebration and announcement of how bad a guy Qasem Soleimani was, although he was beloved throughout the Middle East. It is the judgment of the white man upon a man of color and a civilization that is not Western.
That's right.
And who are they to judge? But anyway, so they're afraid because they know that they will, as they say, inherit the whirlwind. I was saying to my friend Yvonne last night, we were talking, not a lot about this, you know, but we're trying to just chill, Friday and talk on the phone and trying to laugh and so on. But at one point I said to her, I said, Yvonne, that there are forces in the Iranian regime who are tired of this back and forth and this name calling and this smearing of Iranian leaders and Iranian civilization. And they're saying, in effect, if you so tough, bring it on. You and Israel.
That's right.
Come on with it. And that's, and I'm convinced that there are forces who, by the way, you should know, never wanted to sign the nuclear agreement with the West. Never wanted to give up their ambition to at least have intercontinental missiles that could strike as far as the United States. But it was a compromise. And if you study that deal, it was for 15 years. It was not a permanent thing. And that was the compromise within the Iranian government. But what they call the hardliners in this country are those who say that at some point we have to draw a line in the sand. And if the West, and in particular the United States, wants war, now or whenever, we are prepared to defend our country. We will call upon our countrymen to make whatever sacrifice is necessary. And that's where we are right now. And I said to Yvonne, this could drag on, or there could be an immediate confrontation. So let me just read this part of this article. You get a sense. The funerals were held against, there were two funerals. One of the military leaders of Iraq, a high official, and Qasem Soleimani, the highest military leader in Iran. They were both killed in a cowardice drone attack. They were not in a military column. They were not on a battlefield. They were in civilian clothes, in a civilian car. You know what I'm saying? So you're dealing with cold-blooded punks and cowards. This is what this country has become. And I know it directly from the war in Vietnam, although I was not in the war, I was a resistor. What they did to the Vietnamese people, civilians, only cowards and racists of the most extreme form would commit. And they've never apologized to Vietnam, or for that matter, to Korea for what they did there a generation earlier. But let me just read. The funerals were held against a backdrop of extreme regional tension, as Iran and the United States signaled they could be on the brink of a potentially catastrophic war. A potentially catastrophic war, by which they're saying it is not just a war where they would attack, where the U.S. would attack Iran, but it would be a war that would engulf the whole region, including Israel. And there are, and I would just say to you, Hezbollah, which stands for the Party of God, which is a Lebanese military political organization. The first Hezbollah Israeli war, I think, was in 2002, and it was a stalemate. And then in the next one in 2006, Hezbollah won it. And Israel, which was trying to occupy a part of Lebanon, were forced to flee and retreat. And I know with all that talk that they do, they don't want to go in there again. You see what I'm saying? Hezbollah is aligned with Iran, and the same thing, the Houthis in Yemen, and significant forces in Syria, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I say that to say it would be a total war throughout the Middle East. And so they're saying these funerals, hundreds of thousands of people attended. The Iraqi general will be buried in Iraq. That take place against regional tensions as Iran and the United States signaled they could be on the brink of a potentially catastrophic war. Since the killing of General Suleiman and Mr. al-Mohandes, neither side has made another move, although both have made threats. That is Iran and the United States. At the joint funerals, as close to a state ceremony, a state funeral, as any since the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003. As any since the fall of Saddam, a key pillar of Iran's regional reach was on display in Baghdad. That is Iraq. The mobilization fighters, faces somber and almost all dressed in black, carried a vast array of flags representing their different groups. They chanted, "The blood of Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes will not be spilled in vain. Revenge is coming." This is not Iraq in 2003 or Afghanistan in 2001. Precisely what kind of revenge was planned was not clear. But without giving details, a senior Revolutionary Guard commander was quoted on Saturday by the Tasnim news agency as saying that Iran would punish Americans wherever they are within reach of the Islamic Republic in retaliation for the killing of General Soleimani. General Ghulam Mali Abu Hamza, the commander of the guards in the southern province of Kerman, that's in Iran, raised the prospect of possible attacks on ships in the Persian Gulf. Iran reserved the right to take revenge against the United States for the death of Soleimani. He said in comments made late on Friday and reported on Saturday, quote, "The Strait of Hormuz," you know, that small, narrow strait which separates the Gulf, the Persian Gulf from the Indian Ocean, from the sea. Small strait where 70% of the oil produced in the Persian Gulf has to go through that, which is over 20% of the oil produced in the world. So if you shut that down, you send the world into almost a Great Depression. The Strait of Hormuz, he said, the Strait of Hormuz is a vital point for the West, and a large number of American destroyers and warships cross there, he said. Vital American targets in the region have been identified by Iran since a long time ago. Some 35 U.S. targets in the region, as well as Tel Aviv, are within our reach. End quote. The loss of Mr. al-Mohandes, the Iraqi general, was a profound one for the Iraqi fighters who saw him not just as a militia leader close to Iran, but also as someone who had helped rally the armed groups when they when they first formed in 2014 to fight ISIS, the Islamic State. The extremists were then threatening to sweep from the north to Baghdad, the Iraqi capital. So these are people whose legends and reputations are based upon not sitting in some office giving commands over the phone, but frontline battlefield fighters. And that was the same with Soleimani in Iran. He fought on the battlefield in the 8-year Iran-Iraq war. So these are not, no powder puffs with medals all over them, like we see these generals here. These are fighters. In fact, I don't know how much you all know about Shia Islam, but there is, have you ever seen, you may have seen pictures, the West tries to make it something, where men will walk in certain ceremonies and they, with kind of chains or something in their hip. Well, that is a ritual signifying the reverence for the martyr. It's probably in certainly no other part of Islam, and seldom in a religion anywhere, where a person like Soleimani would welcome martyrship. You see what I'm saying? They don't fear it. They welcome it. And he will be, revered as such, as a martyr, not just as a fallen soldier, as a martyr. And the emotional, political, and spiritual significance that will carry going forward, and what it means to the nation. That's not, let me just say one other thing. I hate to keep interrupting this, but see, these civilizations are not like the West. They don't start with the individual. They start with the civilization and the ancientness of it. And so those who stand for the values of the civilization and die for them are revered as martyrs. And that's, we might call a martyr, what we might call him is an angel. You see what I'm saying? This is a high honorific status. And it has emotional meaning, which, I don't think is recognizable in any Western society. But let me just continue. Sorry to keep interrupting. Oh, hi. It's good to see you, Anna. Oh, by the way, you guys, if you got the New York Times on your phone, you could pull it up, man. It's the Strait of Hormuz is a vital. Oh, I read that already. The loss of Mr. al-Muhandis was a profound one for the Iraqi fighters who saw him not just as a militia leader, but as, as I said, a frontline fighter. So, many proclaimed during his funeral, quote, "Our men do not fear America. Each man dies on his day. Your voice, Abu Mahdi, remains the loudest." General Soleimani's body will be taken to Najaf, Iraq, a prominent Shiite burial place, then flown to Mashhad, Iran, on Sunday for a funeral service. A large state service is expected in Tehran on Monday. And the general is expected to be buried in his hometown on Tuesday, the news agency said. Amid the tensions, the United States has called on its citizens to leave Iraq. These are the so-called tough guys, It's closed its embassy. The embassy in Baghdad is not an embassy, it's a fortress. So they are afraid. And that's why I say the attack that murdered these two was cowardly, and that's the way they see it over there. But now, the consequences, we're going to shut everything up and everybody going to flee and all. I thought y'all were the tough guys. You know what I'm saying? We'll see now. Okay. And the United States has sent additional Marines, and on Thursday deployed 700 members of the 82nd Airborne Division to the region. 700, right? After the strike, President Trump, the punk and coward that he is, he had an opportunity to do the right thing, to pull back. But he's not, y'all got to see, the way we talk here is a little bit harsh, so you know. He is, as Baldwin described the white man,
Yes.
a fiction of his own imagination. You understand what I'm saying? And they ain't got, you know, that's what I'm saying. I think there are forces in the Iranian top leadership who are in effect saying, okay, all talk is off now.
Yes.
If you're so tough, let's get it on. And that's what they're saying. We'll shut down the Straits of Hormuz, and Americans anywhere in the region will be targets for death. And when they say death to America, they don't just mean symbolically, if you dig where I'm coming from. After the strike, President Trump said the attack had been intended, quote, to stop a war, end quote. Somebody need to put a foot up his behind. And warned Iran that the United States military had already identified targets for further strikes. Quote, if Americans anywhere are threatened, end quote. Well, they've been threatened. I mean, that's what they've been doing all the time. We're going to threaten and go. See, that's what I'm saying. It's at the point where the talking is going to end. You know, and all of this threats and, see, let me just parentheses once again. You see, America's war-fighting strategy is not to fight,
Hey guys.
just from the New York Times article this morning on Iran. After the show, I read, after the strike, President Trump said it had been intended to stop a war and warned Iran. Have you read this morning? Okay. You can pull it up on, you know. Among those attending the funeral on Saturday were Prime Minister Abdel Mahdi of Iraq and a number of senior Shiite leaders, including Ammar al-Hakim, Nouri Kamal al-Maliki, a former prime minister, Falah al-Fayyad, the national security advisor, and Hadi al-Amiri, the leader of the Badr organization, which is both a political party and has one of the largest and oldest militias. Missing from the coterie were Qasi al-Khazali, the leader of one of the most notorious pro-Iran militias in Iraq, Assaib al-Haq, and Hamid al-Jazari, who leads the Khorasani Brigade, a pro-Iran militia. Mr. Abdul Mahdi looked visibly upset as he walked surrounded by security officers in a sea of fighters. As Iraq's leaders, he has been caught between Iran, its neighbor, and the United States as the two have ratcheted up their confrontation. The latest conflict started with a rocket attack. Well, I'm going to go through all of that propaganda. After the funeral on Saturday, some mourners tried to again enter the green zone where the U.S. Embassy is, the seat of the Iraqi government and many embassies. But they were pushed back in contrast to a violent attack on Tuesday when pro-Iranian protesters pushed past guards and laid siege to the American embassy. In Iran, the news media flooded its broadcasts and front pages with coverage of General Soleimani's death, and even news outlets perceived to be more moderate called for revenge. When President Hassan Rouhani of Iran paid his condolences on Saturday during a visit to General Soleimani's home, he too spoke of revenge, but with an open-ended timeline. The Americans did not realize what a great mistake they made, and it is. It's a profound mistake. Mr. Rouhani said, they will see the effects of this criminal act, not only today, but for years to come. And that's the end of that essay. I was saying a little before you all came in, where did Hannah go?
And was it after?
Oh, okay. That this is a horrendous act. That this is not just the murder of an individual, as horrible as that would be, a revered and honored personage in the Iranian nation. But because of his position in the state, it was, in effect, an attack upon the state itself. And hence, a roguish, but nonetheless, an act of war. It was cowardice, and what else could it be coming from here? America has become a nation of cowards, especially the ruling class, and they're going to pay. I was saying that under international law, even in the most belligerent situations, you do not target the leaders of the nation. You know, you don't do it. The United States was at war with Germany. They didn't target Hitler. They were at war with Japan. They did not target the emperor, because the theory of international law and the law of war is that after belligerency, the two sides will have to negotiate. And so the war is not, that's why, you know, even in World War I, after the war, they imposed reparations on Germany. They didn't call for the destruction of the nation state of Germany. The same with Japan. But in the epoch or the era of American hegemony, they have waged total war on people. This has not been done historically. I mean, there was the bombing of Dresden by the United States, the firebomb, which was a horrific thing. There was the dropping of the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But what the United States did, beginning in Korea and then in Vietnam, the attempt to totally destroy people, and now the use of sanctions and military means to destroy people and a nation, nations. This is unheard of. Now, this roguish act, since there is not a credible and viable international legal system, and since the UN and the Security Council have been reduced to nothing, it is incumbent upon the attacked state, in this case Iran, to impose justice upon the criminals. I think, therefore, and I would, well, you know, that this will come sooner than later. And these threats coming from Trump and Bolton and the rest of them will have to be addressed. Now this means that, and this is the thing, you know, I'd always said, and we had said, that a big part of Trump's victory in 2016 was his claim of pullback from war. And it reflected, and you know, we make a distinction between positive and negative peace, a just peace and an unjust peace, a peace, you know. Now, the ruling class of a country like this is not capable of a just peace. But peace, nonetheless, if it is a pullback from previous positions of aggression, as in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. Pull back. Okay? The American people are exhausted. You see what I'm saying? Now, we're still dealing with all of the problems of white supremacy. A reassertion of hegemonic ambitions. And so I would say, I know Nanditha asked me in a text, what did I think of the rally, and I've been thinking about it a lot. I mean, everybody do what they have to do, but I'm not for these little small tokenism actions, you know what I'm saying? The task is to go to the people, if you have connections with the people. That's part of the problem of the so-called white left. They're small and unconnected. We have to go to the churches, we have to go to the unions, we have to go to the communities, we have to speak to people directly, and we have to alert people. As this article said, a catastrophic war is possible, and I think probable. If the United States attacks the refining and oil fields of Iran, the Iranian government has every right to attack the Straits of Hormuz and shut it down, depriving the world of at least 20% of its oil, and thus plunging the West in particular, because I have certain ideas about these sanctions on Iran, but the West into a Great Depression. And I think Iran will be justified. It will be a just action. And of course, we debate the theory of Gandhi and King and of nonviolence as a solution to all problems of war and peace and justice. But I think it was even Gandhi, you can help me with this, Nanditha, who said that a state must defend itself. And this is one of the debates we had when Reverend James Lawson was here. Not a debate, but a discussion. And even with Dennis Dickerson at Lincoln. Is there a theory of the state in the theory of nonviolence? And both pretty much said, no, we're still working that out. But, if you go back to the Middle Ages, it was St. Augustine of North Africa, the first African pope, who said that, who theorized the difference between a just and an unjust war. You see what I'm saying? And what is the action of the victims of an unjust war? What do they do? And what is morally permissible? That's the question all the time. And that's Gandhi and King. What is morally permissible under certain conditions? And under predatory war, where an imperialist colonial power seeks genocide against a nation, what must this nation do? So I think we have to do whatever we can to educate the people. There's a certain, and this is always our problem, a certain lethargy, intellectual laziness, exhaustion with the propaganda that's always in the lies that are always being told to ordinary people. And they just throw up their hands and say, I got to feed my family. And that's understandable. But that does not mean that we who know more should not make an effort to help people understand. We have to do it. That's our moral responsibility. And I think King would have proceeded in that way. And I think it's very important that we revisit King's speech on the war in Vietnam. April 4th, 1967. Because he talks about, and it is a subtle kind of nuance in the speech, of the rights of the Vietnamese people to defend themselves, and that the United States is not the policeman of the whole world. and it is a moral argument. You see what I'm saying? I'll just end on this one. You see, I'm convinced that Iran is prepared to defend itself. Militarily, economically. I think the sanctions, I read an article recently where they're talking about the West sanctions against Russia. And they said Russia has made itself almost immune from the effects of Western sanctions. I think that's similar with North Korea. Of course, they would have a greater development if the sanctions were not on, but they can live and pretty much prosper because they have built an economy and economic relationships which accounts for the sanctions and so on. The same with Iran. But I heard, I was listening to Fox, and they were talking about what they could do to Iran. Well, of course, these cats, Lindsey Graham, they're in plushy offices. You know, they can't even, like any one of us could knock them out, man. So they can talk big willy talk about what they can do. And one of the things that they made clear, and it shows you, they were saying, he was saying, and others were saying, that we have developed weapons where we can strike them from afar. And just to show you how great we are, we targeted and took out Soleimani. You see what I'm saying? He was not in a military convoy. He was in a civilian convoy. He was not hiding. So, oh, this is your big thing? So what will you do when you attack Iran, which has all of the weapons of self-defense, and can, through conventional and other means, not only defend themselves, but go on the offensive against the United States. And here is a United States that is on the verge, or even we could say in the midst of a civil war, a profoundly divided nation, more divided than at the time of the Vietnam War, which was the great anti-war movement. This nation cannot fight for over 2 weeks without the war abroad becoming a war at home. As Malcolm said, that the chicken's coming home to roost. You see what I'm saying? I can't speak for the Iranians, but I hope they strike sooner than later. To teach, as they say it over there, I hate to say, I don't like to talk like this. These people's mouths have to be shut. They have to be taught finally a lesson. 500,000 Syrians killed because of the United States and its allies, in particular Israel. A peaceful nation, Libya, the most prosperous nation in the Middle East and in Africa, brought down and reduced to rubble by these people. Iraq, the most prosperous Arab nation in the Middle East, reduced to this. And believe me, the most educated population, the most educated women. In fact, women were more educated in Iraq than men, brought down by these people. Finally, their mouths have to be shut. And we have to explain to the American people what justice is and what positive peace is. I'll shut up. It's anybody? Go ahead. I know. Oh, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say, I think that Iran and Iraq would have struck back by now if it wasn't for, I think, Russia and China, which I heard were counseling Iran and saying now is not the time for revenge.
But what is the argument for why
Yeah,
not now?
It didn't, you know what I mean, it was like breaking news, it didn't go in, you know, to it. But then, you know, after that, then later this morning, I mean, I was up all night, you know, fresh TV and whatnot, that the United States or Israel bombed a military convoy of Iraqis and killed 6 military personnel.
That was
Yeah, yeah, that was after they killed the 2 generals. You know, so it
See, I don't
kicked
think.
the hornet's nest.
Yeah. Oh, well,
And
okay, I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry.
And it's easy, I think it's easy and simple for China and Russia,
Absolutely.
you know, to say that. But the Iraqis and now the Iranians, their people and their military state is under attack.
And you're not even go one step. Their civilization.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a grave situation, and you can't see. And the thing about Russia and China, in the 1990s, on the Security Council in the early 2000s, they went along with U.S.-sponsored sanctions against Iran. You know, the Iranians haven't forgotten that. They did the same thing against North Korea. Now, okay, now they've changed recently, since they're under the hammer. But I think, oh, I'm sorry. Go
No.
ahead, Butch.
No, yeah, like you say, even in a moral, you know, dilemma for them, at some point, the state has to defend itself.
Because the Security Council is not defending the victims of aggression.
No.
The Security Council has abdicated.
And like Israel was saying, always said that the Arabs wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
This is exactly
What's going to happen?
what they want. That's what they're trying. That's what they're doing in Iran and Iraq
Yeah.
presently. You know, in my opinion, I think Israel is going to be the first to take the brunt of the hit.
Go,
Government,
yeah.
the government, because they're in reach. And the United States and Israel with this attack have galvanized that region. You
I don't
know,
think there's any question about it.
people that were, you know, on the fence, you know, saying, no, we can, you know, talk and work this thing out. I think that's over.
Right.
That's just my opinion.
No. Can I just, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Roger. No, please, you go ahead. I'm talking. Can I just say one thing? Unless the international community can guarantee the security of Iran and disarm and denuclearize the Persian Gulf and all of the waterways around Iran, and force the United States to withdraw from its militarization of the Middle East. Unless it can do this, they can't tell Iran anything. Iran must do what it has to do. And I think its hand is stronger than it's ever been. But the reason, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just, you know, to piggyback on that, I think Iran and Iraq has very recent history to show that NATO, the United Nations, and Western Europe cannot rein in the American government.
Nope. It's not going to happen.
No.
Go ahead, Reggie.
Oh no, yeah, I was going to. I mean, I didn't see this with Russia and China, whether they made that advice, but I think I was going to agree with you that I think Iran is in a very strong position. I think back in 2008 or 9 even, the CIA tried to do a simulation of what would happen if there was a war with Iran, and turned out they had 20,000 American soldiers killed in 2 days. They had to stop the simulation. I think Iran is very well prepared. It's not like Iraq, it's a much bigger country. It's completely unified, I think. And on the other hand, the people that the US can rely on in that region, I think Saudi Arabia has its hands full with the Yemenis. They're not able to win that war, despite having $100 billion from the United States in weapons and so on. They're not able to beat the Yemenis. I think Israel is not that united right now. And obviously we know the domestic political situation in the United States. And I think a combination of these, along with the fact that economically the Western financial institutions which were set up to control the world economy no longer have the power that they did, and many people are finding ways outside of them. And I think I had read, I'm not completely sure about this, but that Iran did joint naval exercises with Russia and China, which all of which I think goes to show that there is no way the United States can win this war, and it would really signal the end of the empire if they tried to get into it.
Did anybody see Susan Rice last night on television? I know she's kind of weak. I mean, you got to take her with a grain of salt, but she is an educated woman. She's Harvard grad, and she's a killer. Well, she signed off with a lot of people. When you see like Obama, he killed a lot of people with those drones attack. They say drones, you talking about people that kill it. But what she said was, and it made anybody within it, you don't have to be a general or army man, it makes common sense. The reason the Bush didn't have this guy killed, because America can kill anybody they want to kill. They kill us right in this room if they feel like it. They have the technology and all that to do that. The reason why Bush didn't do it and Obama didn't do it, they thought about, well, if we do this, what's going to happen after we do it? What was it worth it? And they came up with the solution, it wasn't worth it. How this administration said it was worth it, can't nobody figure it out. They're the only ones saying, certain of them were saying that it was worth it. But everybody else said, we knew this guy was a killer, we knew he did this, he knew he did that, but he just sat there. It's like asbestos. As long as it's in the corner, you don't wake it up, you don't have no problem.
No, let me just say something. I want to say something about that. You see, they could not have killed him in Iran.
Okay.
He was in Iraq.
Right.
Iraq is infiltrated by the U.S. military and the CIA. He was in a civilian convoy. They have enough agents to say, oh, they're there, you know.
Yeah.
You know, in Iran, they don't have that. So they couldn't have got to it. But he's not a killer, by the way.
Oh, he is.
No, Suleiman is not a killer.
Right.
The people who killed him are the killers.
Well,
He's not a thug and a terrorist or any of that. You know?
I agree. And for them to say, we just stopped, I don't know, have y'all been listening to that crazy stuff they're saying?
Yeah.
We just stopped terrorism.
No.
I couldn't believe they had enough guts to say stuff like that.
But
Yeah,
go ahead. Let me.
Well, no, I was going to say quite the opposite. I think he comes from a very humble background. He's the son of a farmer.
So you don't know all that. I never paid much attention.
And the first time he went into it was during the Iran-Iraq war. In his village, he collected a bunch of young people and said, we're going to go and fight for our nation. And that was how he eventually, and always on the front lines, so how he eventually rose to the position that he did.
If I could just say one thing. See, this narrative, by the way, one of the, quote, positive outcomes of this is that suddenly the Democrats have become interested in the question of peace. That was never, all they talk about is universal health care for everybody, everybody gets free college, let everybody out of jail, and that type of thing. But suddenly now they're the peace party, which upsets our narrative, because we were saying they're the party of war, which they are. But in the political thing going on here, they suddenly become peace advocates, and they still ain't mentioned Tulsi's name. But let me call, what's your name again?
John.
John, go ahead, John. And then, May.
So I was just wondering, because we talked about how the American media is promotes this propaganda, and with this this inciting action of supposedly Iran attacking a military base and killing an American contractor. So what I don't understand is what the function of this attack that killed this beloved general. What, like with Iraq, there's the motivation to get in there and privatize the oil fields and all this stuff. But this seems like we're doing something, but the United States is doing something really foolhardy that is not going to end well for anyone. So why even, what is their ulterior motive if there is one?
Well, I don't think they have. You see, this is, well, maybe Magna can answer that, I think. Would you like to? Or somebody else? Because, yesterday morning, Raju texted me, which I was waiting to hear from him. He said, act of desperation. These are desperate people without any concept of a future, of humanity.
That's right.
They're crazy. And they have to be stopped. Appeasement cannot be the answer to this. And that's, if what Butch said is right, that's all this talk about, well, let's find a peace. Like the British said the same thing. Oh, let's find a peaceful way. What the fuck are you talking about? You can't appease them. And that's what I'm saying. We cannot appease the language of the media, that he's such a bad guy, he's a terrorist. And like Raju said, one of the most humble cats. But see, a munchie. See, in Iran, under Shia Islam, a cat like him, they don't fear death.
Yeah, they don't.
Because they seek martyrdom.
That's what we talked about yesterday.
That's what we were talking about.
You can't, if a man is willing to die, you caught, unless you're willing to kill him, you really don't have. And that man or woman is free. Right, and he's free. Once you're free of whatever fear, you believe in. By the way, that was Gandhi. You go to where you go to it, and you can't do this. And see, this thing yesterday, you got a nation that is not afraid. That's right. And who's going to fight them? They said, did you see 3,000 troops they sent over there? Like they got all these armies, so they don't have a military. They don't have. And them cats they sent over there gonna run. You know, I mean, we know the American people. The wars are always fought with poor people. That's who fight the wars. Yes. Poor people. Poor people from beginning to the end of the Civil War. The poor people fight wars. That's who fight these wars. And I don't know where they're gonna get it from, because see the young people they're not like the group that me. Well, Tony stood up, but when you was 18 years old and you got drafted, you went away. No one said I ain't going. No, everybody said, I'm going. You didn't even think about it. Your whole family told you, go. And listen, I never got drafted. I went to 1801 Broad Street. And those days, when you got 18, 401 North Broad. Oh, 401. And you had to go there, you had to show up in person. Yeah, and people went down there and said they were juveniles, so they didn't mean nothing. When you got 8, and that's when I realized, as dumb as I was, when I went up there, I saw everybody from South Philly. So I knew, I see guys I hadn't seen since elementary school. And I'm saying, damn, you got drafted by your zip code. They say my zip code was 19146. We won 100 guys out of here. But down there at, say, 7th and Pine, we only won 6. So that's how you got them. That's how you made the poll. Well, that's what we call the color line. Yeah, we call it. So they did the same thing in Kensington and 2th Street. They did it up there, all down there, the Italian market, all down through there. They grafted them like the same way. But that's who fights war. So I'm just curious to know now who's gonna. I mean, and I didn't really understand that. It hit me yesterday. Yesterday morning, I got up, I couldn't sleep, and I was watching. And I said, wow, we done done something. We ain't in this, but they done something here. And everybody kept saying for years, leave them alone, but they have an army. They ain't like these little, they got an army, so, but now they're waiting now. But they can't, but see, if I could, well, let me let Megan, but see, the question is, why can't they leave them alone? Because they seek to dominate.
the Middle East,
Yeah.
the oil-rich part of the planet.
Correct.
They can't leave them alone. And so we've now reached a point, after 20 years, starting in 2001 with Afghanistan, and then 2003 with Iraq, and then on and on and on. Now we've reached the moment of truth. We are in a moment of truth. They can't leave them alone. Now it's going to be either you win or we win. And I agree. Like Raju said, a study came out in 2009. Could you repeat that, Raju? I mean, you talk so soft. I don't know very fast.
Well, I think I think it was maybe the Pentagon or the CIA was involved, but they did a simulation where the way they do it is that they take, I guess, 2 American generals, so, 2 American military people, and ask them to be on opposite sides of the war, and then they strategize, and then they're given the kinds of capabilities that the 2 sides would have, and then it's a simulation that they have to see then what would happen, and because of the kind of unconventional warfare that Iran can do, where it can hit very quickly and very, especially in its naval capabilities, in 1 or 2 days after the simulation proceeded, they found that America lost 20,000 of their men through this, and they had to stop the simulation and change the rules and the basic rules.
That's how
Ain't that
it
something?
works.
Yeah.
That's how the US works.
Can I just say one other thing about the advantage that the so-called weaker naval forces have against these aircraft carriers and destroyers? The example is Germany during World War I, where Britain and France were reliant upon the United States supplying them, because that war dragged on. People were having strikes. They didn't want to go to war, work or war. So the United States was manufacturing food and other equipment for the French and British. But what the Germans did is to use these, what they call U-boats, which is really submarines. And these were very inexpensive and couldn't be defended against. And they began to attack shipping. Now, the West said this was a violation of international law because these were not warships, but they were ships supplying a belligerent nation. And so the Germans, now I say that to say that these small boats with Revolutionary Guard members that Iran has, not only can, first of all, a big aircraft carrier can seldom see them. They're small, and the Iranians probably have U-boats or submarines.
Like that, yeah.
It would, why would you mess with them? 80 million people.
I know they got submarines, but they're old now because I worked on ships in the shipyard, submarines, and we was laughing at who buy this stuff. They were buying it.
But why?
It was Second World War submarine. Yeah.
You see what I'm
They
saying?
were buying them, all the ones down the shipyard were sent over here because they came over here, and the soldiers, they didn't smoke. I forgot, we used to trade stuff with them, like booze and cigarettes. Iranians, I don't think they drunk. Something they didn't do. They don't drink.
Yeah.
So the Navy gives you a certain amount of booze to drink. They do. They give you got a booze ration. Get drunk, be alcoholic. I'm serious. I'm serious. So we would get their booze ration and trade them cigarettes. They wanted cigarettes. And that's when the carton of cigarettes cost like $5, something like that. We would trade them cigarettes for the booze, and they didn't eat pork. So they got we were laughing at the fact that, but though the Greeks and them were the most disciplined guys I've seen as far as taking orders. Because a lot of the American sailors and Marines, they'll take orders, but not like they do. They was different. But that was in the 60s. And and I heard yesterday that at one time he was fighting with America,
No. They were fighting against ISIS.
And how did he get involved? What he was saying? I was half asleep.
Well,
They said something.
let me just call on Megan. We'll come back to that. Go ahead, Megan.
That was all I was gonna say, is that this whole narrative that he's a terrorist, he defeated the terrorists who are
Right.
trying to destroy the country, who are funded by the US. I mean, maybe that's why he's such a big threat. Because
See, but see what Trump, and I listened to his speech, but to prevent a war. And the whole world is laughing in contempt. This is an act of war that will only lead to a catastrophe. But I say like this, Munchie, it's going to come as a shock to most people, but somebody's going to have to explain this to them. And we can't be afraid of what's coming. But
Do you think they're waking up? Do you think people,
Who?
the mass public?
we don't know. We have to see. You know, and of course, you know, the American people have a responsibility. One, for their silence in the face of oppression. Can't get away from that. And the other is active support of this bullshit. It's not as though the American people are walking around, negative people, we want peace because we're suffering. But now it's going to be more suffering. And and this is the great danger, and this is why I brought up the U-boats, the submarine warfare. The Straits of Hormuz, if they are shut down, you see what I'm saying? And the United States said, okay, then the United States is going to go to drone warfare, because they ain't going up in there. They're not going to do that.
They don't have the manpower. I don't think.
Well, they don't have man and woman power that'll go up in there and fight them people. See, because them cats over there, come on, and you got something? You a boxer, you know what I'm saying? But I'm saying if they shut down, it'll be catastrophe for the West, especially Europe, that gets all of its oil from the Persian Gulf, natural gas from Russia, but oil from the Persian Gulf. Now, suppose oil goes up to $300 a barrel and $10 a gallon at the pump. Man, come on. Bush. Trump has really done that.
You think he's pulling his own kite? I mean, you actually believe he's like these? You take these judges he put in that lower court that's going to be there for life. These guys are so wacky.
We're at the point where all bets are off. See, the question of who he puts on the Supreme Court might be a third order consideration if the economy collapses. See, a war of this magnitude will affect stock markets around the world, will affect commodity prices around the world, starting with oil, and will affect the relationships between currencies, i.e., where will the dollar end up after this? Now, let me just say one thing on this. See, once Nixon took the U.S. dollar off the gold standard and said, now we're going, what we say go, we down and all that, so on and so forth. Once he did that, the foundation of the dollar is what they call the petrodollar. In other words, what gold used to be, oil now is. The guy he done started some bullshit that he can't get out of. The guy done got into, it's like a dummy.
Straight up.
You walk, straight
He
up.
had to have somebody to help him come up with this, Tony. He just saying, let me go fight these
But he
people.
listening to a lot of them cats, some neocons, Bolton, that cat. And he need to catch a bad break. Yeah.
That guy,
catch a bad break.
Tony, the little itty bitty guy, he's a war hawk too. He was on the news last night. Talk about, we did the right thing. We took the
Talking about Pennsylvania?
No, from Pennsylvania. Real small. What's his name?
It's hard to follow.
Yeah. Real small. He's always on the crazy stuff.
For one thing, they realize they in deep doo-doo. See, and Iran gonna take them out into the deep See, we talking boxing terms
No,
now.
well,
Because he's
fighting-
a boxer.
well, listen,
He's a boxer.
Fight ain't got nothing to do with
Yeah,
this. He's a real
but I mean, but when you take them out to deep water, you take the cat out to deep water,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah.
See, they can't afford to go out there. They
No,
can't
that's what I'm
afford to carry
saying.
no long one in
Or
water.
you take it, like they say, you take a cat out to deep
Yeah.
water and he can't swim. Now what you gonna do? You in my house now. And you, see, go ahead, I'm
No,
sorry. I'm interrupting.
I was just thinking how, when I listen to Trump and see what he's done and understand he's supporting the Supreme Court, somebody's telling him to do this. He's not picking these guys out because he's intelligent like that. And this move here, why all of a sudden now you jump up and
That's a
attack
good-
at this guy who is like a snake? You know he's there, whatever he was.
But then don't use that
Oh,
word.
yeah, I should have said it because I don't know him that well. Yeah, I'm
Call a
just,
man
yeah,
all
I'm,
kind of
yeah,
bad.
right.
You
He's
looking
not
at
a
too
snake.
much CNN,
Yeah,
man.
right, yeah. I watch Fox News too.
No, you don't.
No, saying, if you don't know what your enemy is doing, you're a fool.
Yeah, well, true
Yeah.
that.
So I turn and I listen, and because I like the other people. You know, I'm not always right.
No.
I'm trying to think.
And
of
I'm
me.
gonna
And I
tell
shouldn't
you,
call that guy no
Ivan look at a lot of Fox.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. But I listen to them and they sound crazy. Then sometimes but I'm just curious to know and listen to all the things you hear.
Could I ask Raju to answer
Yeah,
that question,
please, yeah.
which you've asked several times,
I'm
and
sorry.
nobody's answered?
Yeah,
I'm gonna ask
Good
Raju.
question.
Oh,
the
why
question-
did they do it now?
Why all of a sudden now is the time to do this? You think it's because of impeachment or
Yeah,
or some other stuff they know is coming down the pipe?
I don't know if I
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do think, that, Bolton was very extravagant, flamboyant, kind of always in the news, and how much he wants to do regime change in Iran. But the guy who has replaced him, I think Robert Dunn or something like that, his
Yeah.
name is, I don't think he's any different ideologically on how he views what is to be done in Iran. But he keeps sort of aloof. He's not as much in the media. He may be a more effective evil in terms of how he operates as a national security advisor, because you don't really see him in the news at all. Whereas Bolton was always there.
Yeah.
You're always seeing Bolton and Trump and Bolton clashing.
And the vice
Yeah.
president,
Right.
he just wanted making all these crazy statements about how we were right to do this. And yeah, did you see that this morning? He was the vice president. They made a big statement. Yeah.
I think that presidents have historically shifted the focus to international relations and foreign policy, where their domestic policy and proposition is weakened, and impeachment does that for Trump. So to answer your question, Munchie, I think you're right. The impeachment is motivating it.
He gets killed somebody to have the weight taken off of him.
But see, Trump is, from the time that he was inaugurated, he was campaigning for his reelection. So you have to understand that he is a leader in name only. He leads himself and for himself. He does not have a constituency more than one. And for that reason, everything that he does in terms of his domestic policy, his international policy and ideology is all focused around him and his reelection. And that's a huge force in our life. And if I didn't have the encouragement of spirits like free school,
I thought you were gonna say your past ancestors.
no, well, they're here too, but I'm just encouraged by the free thought here and the young minds here that are so well tooled. And as we run up to the election in 2020, these kind of conversations, and then Du Bois, Baldwin, they're going to help us navigate our way through the next 10 months or so, because this is the big one. He said that if you don't elect me, it's going to be another 50 years before you get your country back. So he's dog whistling to the pre-Civil War America, Jim Crow America, white America is what he's leading back. He has carte blanche to do whatever, however he wants to democracy and so forth. In my community activist work in Delaware County, I live in Upper Darby. I've been a member of Havertown Community Action Network since he was elected. And I tell them that when I came of age in 1965, when we integrated my local high school in South Carolina, okay, South Carolina, Beaufort, South Carolina. When we did that, I have to go back to what I'll say, and I'll just say it one more time, and then I'll shut up. Is that he is appealing to a patriotism of his cohort. The country that he's returning to its rightful owners are mobilized and galvanized around America First, America Strength. That's what he's dog whistling to. And it's a show and a play of strength. Again, he's campaigning to his cohort for re-election. And my theory is that my theory of his leadership is that it is totally organized around his re-election. And if he gets a second term, we'll have a de facto kind of mini, semi, kind of, sort of Jim Crow thing, because he'll have another 4 years to stack the court.
But Grady, let me just say, and then others could. See, if what you're saying is true,
Okay.
you know, I think the most credible polls show that the two things that were in the minds of his followers, and even up till now, is they don't want no more of these wars in the Middle East. And they don't. I mean, that doesn't make them angels. It just means that they see it's not serving their interests. And they're hoping that the economy can at least stay where it's at. I think this attack threatens both.
Okay.
I think it's even. I think that his re-election is now. I would say before I was saying that he had a 60% chance of being re-elected. Now I believe that he has a 60% chance of being defeated because the coalition, with all of the white supremacy, they didn't want these wars no more, and they were hoping the economy would grow to the extent that a capitalist economy. So I think I think he did it. But let me let Butch come in.
I was just,
Excuse me. Let me just go now.
I don't believe that Trump came in as president. I don't think he had foreign policy, so to speak. He did. No, and what happened Thursday or Friday, the bombing, that was something I think that was planned well before he even considered running for president. I think what it shows is that he's lost his battle with the deep state. That's what, you know what I mean? That's what I see, because he didn't go into Iran the first time they wanted him to go. In July. You know what I mean? They wanted to go in bad, and he sent the jet, but then he pulled him back, at the last moment.
And he didn't want war either.
He didn't want war, because when you look at the polls, the same people that voted for Obama in 2008, 2012, voted for Trump in 2016. And we're talking about the white people in Appalachia and Ohio, Michigan, in those states, Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, those white people had voted for Obama. And then they turned and voted for Trump. But I think what it shows is that Trump has lost the battle with deep state that he was in a fight with from the moment he was inaugurated. And getting back to this idea of democracy, there was so much going on with this that I had to pull out Du Bois' Dust of Dawn and read The White World. And if you had time, anybody had time, I would suggest, just read that chapter. But just on the democracy piece, Du Bois said, the democracy which the white world seeks to defend does not exist. It has been splendidly conceived and discussed, but not realized. And in hindsight, and looking back at history, and black people in particular, and the working class and the poor in general, I don't see anything that the Democrats have done for us as a group. There may have been a few people, you know what I mean, that rose up the ladder in the group, but as a mass of people, I think black people, poor and working class people have gone backwards as far as economics, education, I mean, the whole ball and wax. I just don't see where we progressed as a group in this country under what's democracy.
I think when they start dumbing down the schools, and you can see when they did it in the 60s, 66, I came out of school in 65, they literally took the arts, the crack. Philadelphia had the best, guys were going to buy coming out of steam fitters, welders, electricians, plumbers. You can make a good buck doing that. Painters, which I was. They took all that away. They took music out. Music helped you think. They dumbed down the public school. My mother always said it was going to turn around and bite them in the ass, and it has. She didn't say it like that, but everybody's got dumbed down. People don't read, they don't think. I disagree with Tony though. It's kind of, you know, I don't want to get beat up in here, but I think that if God forbid, I mean God forbid, there is this war, which I think is going to happen. This thing, I really believe it's going to get nasty and dirty. I think you're going to hear these drafts. You're going to hear that pretty soon. Because everybody I know that's in the service, I know a few people still left there. There's nobody there. They're so drained of people. They want women who can fight, combat fighters, right? And that never happened. It happened in other countries, but not here in America. They actually have women now that they're grooming up to fight. I think if that happens, and there is really an all-out wholesale war, he'll be hard to beat. Because Trump, because if they don't blame him for this, right? And it don't look like they're going to. Don't look like, I don't hear a whole lot of blame going around. Maybe this just started, so if they don't blame him for going in there and asking questions why he did this, him being at the top, they won't want to change. Well, it's a war, let him finish it out. This is my opinion of it, you know, that they won't, you know, I think he'll be hard to beat. Now he might, if the women think that their sons are going to get drafted, then it's going to be a whole different ball game. The whole thing's going to change. That's what killed Vietnam. Those body bags coming back, everybody who lived back there, remember, 6, 10, and 12, and he showed you these people coming home. It was the women who went out, and when Johnson put that thing in there, he made every daddy go. The women voters said, no, we can't have our sons fighting this stuff. So I think if it falls out and we got a whole scale fighting, and he's at the top, and they don't blame him for this, he'll be hard to beat. He's hard to beat right now. I hear people talk about, no, he's not. The Democrats act crazy. They don't even act like they got a lick of sense in their heads. The stuff they saying
Go ahead, Pasha.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to talk, I mean, I'm not convinced of the explanation that's being offered in the news media that, you know, domestically he was having a tough time, and so he had to do this. I don't think he was having that tough a time. The impeachment, everybody knew it was going to get into the Senate, and then nothing was going to happen after that. He was right there. The Democrats don't have a candidate really who can compete with him, and yeah, I think that's the other question that you raised, Munshi, about what will the American people do and how will they see this, which I think is a really important question. I was looking at Fox News too.
I don't look at nothing else.
Everybody I know say, I look at you.
But Tucker Carlson opposed it. Tucker Carlson opposed this thing.
Yeah.
His claim was that Washington had outmaneuvered Trump. Now, I don't know what happened and how and what made him change
I love that
from
guy.
coming all
He made a statement one time. The only reason he wasn't a Marine.
What you selling now? But go ahead. I gotta look at you a different way now.
The only reason I wasn't a Marine, I just couldn't climb the ladder. I said, huh? Yeah, you go back and look at that stuff. Yeah, I love that guy. You ever seen the looks he gives?
And I think the liberal media and haven't, the Democrats are sort of opposing it, but more because they're opposing Trump.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're vilifying him, Soleimani, at the same the New York Times carries an article on how Iran should name a street after Donald Trump, that's such a favor. I mean, so it's not really, but Tucker Carlson show, he didn't really go there.
Yeah.
He just said this is terrible, he didn't talk about him, and which is much more than you can expect.
Yeah, man, you can imagine, because he's in trouble all.
And so how the part of his base, which was against war, which was hearing that message, that we need to pull out of these wars, which he was saying again and again during his election and after it, how they're going to react to this, and how the anti-Trump movement is going to position itself, I think will be a very important.
That base, see, in upstate Pennsylvania, up there, Lock Haven, and further up there, Penn State, all up there, who normally, when them boys and girls now get 18, they go right in the Army, or the Navy, or they go right off, there's no work up there. And the mills are shut down, there's no coal or nothing. In the last 40 years, they ain't all gung-ho about fighting anymore either. Because their children were coming home all messed up, not getting any help.
But isn't this a part of the legacy of Vietnam?
Yes, because everybody I know that's my age that's been in Vietnam has a problem of some kind, physical problem, like my cousin, all this, and mental. And these guys coming home now, they call them sand fighters. They're worse than even these guys have been in combat, some of them 5 or 6 years straight. Vietnam, you just 13 months and you was out. These guys are doing 2 or 5. So. But the difference is they wave that flag and they have their parades and all that, but they ain't going in the army or maybe it ain't because of opiums either. It's the fact that they see after the First World War, the Second World War, the Korean War, and Vietnam, they see what happens to the young men. So they're not gung-ho to go fight for somebody.
Yeah, see,
this is my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes, please.
I just want to bring attention to the idea that actions speak much louder than words, and when the Democratic Party and many leading members talk about how, pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal was a bad idea, it was a good deal, we should stay there. I'm not sure about this, but how many Democratic members have gone to Iran to try to broker something or piece something together there? To my knowledge, none of them. So it's a nice talking point to say that you're against these things. It's nice to say that it's a reckless thing to do. But to give him military power to do that very recently in voting, I think there was 188 Democrats who voted to increase military spending and give him the ability to make this quote-unquote unilateral decision, although I think it's a decision that's very much given actual bipartisan support. When they use words to paint a guy like a villain and a monster, you're giving credence to what he's doing, you're giving him legitimacy. And it kind of just makes me think of that poem we were reading last week.
That's right.
Baldwin was talking about, manifest destiny, a hymn to madness, right?
Oh, what? Say that again?
A hymn to madness.
A hymn to. Could you just tell everybody what the poem was that we read last? Everybody.
I'm trying. It was Staggering Wonders.
Yes, Staggering Wonders by James Baldwin.
Yeah, it's sort of. I think that term kind of is a good. Concise way of talking about just the white world and how it treats the peoples of the East and people all over the world as, there's a lot, it's hard to go over everything that's in that poem because there's a lot in it, but that really stuck out to me. And something else came up about the history of the U.S. relations with Iran. And how in 1988, I think it was, they downed a civilian airline, killed almost 300 people, and the president of the United States wouldn't even apologize. And that's sort of the level of disregard the West has for other people. And they don't see them as people, which is another what that poem is about. They don't want to look in the mirror and see human being on the other side. It's much easier to just say they're a monster, they're a terrorist. The tweet I think Pence put out, which was completely bogus.
Crazy.
He said 11 of the 12 terrorists who attacked 9/11 were trained by this guy Soleimani, or they're given information to do this. And it's like, well, first of all, they were quote unquote 19, not 12. Right? And most of them were from Saudi Arabia. So when the United States decides to do something like this, they go pretty hard on the propaganda and on the lies. So it's to be expected, but it is still audacious. It's still
I like to see
Hold
how.
on, let me let Samir go.
I wanted to respond to Munchie about what he said about, the deep state overcoming Trump or beating Trump. I don't think the deep
Oh, that was you, Seth.
And I think that this has shown that Donald Trump's big weakness has always been on foreign policy, Israel. I think it's been more influenced by Israel. It also benefits Netanyahu, who has been Trump's big ally, because Netanyahu was in that corruption scandal and almost couldn't put together a parliament. But and also it does make sense though, because his base is the white nationalist base. Like he is a white nationalist, and white nationalists hate Israel. So he's done something to spite his own base. And I guess maybe he planned it, maybe it was planned before, but maybe he's taking credit for it or something. I don't really know how these decisions are made. But if he really wanted to win the election, he would have pulled back from Iran and Iraq and made a deal with China. But this makes making a deal with China even less likely. Because China won't make a trade deal with someone who's likely to break a trade deal.
That's right.
And then I wanted to bring up, we need to talk about the cultural differences in that part of Asia, about martyrdom and the religious significance of the grandson of Ali Hussein.
We're talking about Shia Islam, and the history of Shia Islam. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're correct. Political Shia Islam, which is different from political Sunni Islam. I was watching a video on Twitter of Suleiman's relatives asking President Rouhani, when are we going to have revenge and who will give revenge? And Rouhani says, all of us. And talks about what we're talking about. So I would suggest that that culture doesn't have a turn the other cheek mentality. That there is an idea of blood money, and they're not. I would say Iran is not striking immediately because Iran is in a state of mourning, and then also that this assassination is a part of a string of other assassinations like Baghdadi, like the founder of the White Helmets. It's the wrapping up of the Syrian civil war where all the ties are being tied together. I just thought I was curious to point that out.
Emil, you kind of reminded me of, James Baldwin has a line, how can I trust what you say when I see what you do, right? Even trying to, at this point, I can understand the Iranian line. And I would ask, about this question of nonviolence. I don't think we could ever ask them, to be nonviolent. I don't think that's fair. I would ask what we would do, the Saturday preschool. But I think that's where these foreign countries can kind of take a page out of Baldwin's book. Raju famously says India can learn from or needs James Baldwin in X, Y, and Z. Just your categorization of the United States as a rogue regime, I think is critical. Because that is exactly what it is. How can I trust what you say when I'm seeing you do the exact opposite of what you're saying? You're talking about not getting into a regime change war, and then you bomb somebody. It doesn't even matter if he was a layman. You bomb somebody. For real?
Just what he was just saying, from the poem by Baldwin. You want to read it, man? It's just, I got it right here. Perhaps Just that part, because this is very interesting. Then,
Then perhaps, or
yeah, perhaps, yeah, right on that. Yeah. See, perhaps.
then perhaps they imagine that their crimes are not crimes.
No.
No.
Perhaps.
Someone
Perhaps.
Yeah, read it loud. So they-
Perhaps that is why they cannot repent, why there is no possibility of repentance. Manifest destiny is a hymn to madness, feeding on itself, ending, when it ends, in madness. The action is blindness and pain, pain bringing a torpor so deep that every act is willed, is desperately forced, is willed to be a blow. The hand becomes a fist, the prick becomes a club, the womb a dangerous swamp, the hope and fear of love is acid in the marrow of the bone. No, there is a fire not quenched, nor can be, the oil feeding the flames being the unadmitted terror of the wrath of God.
Yeah. Would you like to say a few words about that, or Grady? Would you? I mean, you're the great interpreter of that. I mean, would you like to? I don't know if everybody got that. This is from. Did that make sense? Could you hear? Everybody could hear it, all right? Well, go ahead, Grady. I know.
Yeah. When Emil mentioned that manifest destiny, the word that I associated with that is metaphysic, meaning that you're talking about a reality that is beyond this one, the realm of God, ultimate truth, and so on and so forth, that always has an ethical or moral connection to here on earth. So what he was saying in these lines about small things that manifest destiny calls for becomes big things that justify themselves. A prick becomes a club. The very thing that you think is just implementation or means to an end, if it's not working, you're justified in ramping it up another level. Because, not based on reason on the earth about what's appropriate, reasonable, decent, fair, humane. When you talk about the justification that's connected to manifest destiny, you're saying that destiny is a path and a purpose that exists out of time in history. It exists in this.
That's right. Yeah.
That's it. It's a God.
That's right.
And therefore, everything that you do here and now is warranted and justified. And what Baldwin is saying there is that it's a dangerous philosophy and ideology. And what,
as he called it, a hymn to madness.
a hymn to madness.
Can I just interrupt? And then,
Yep.
This is a poem we've been reading for a couple of weeks by James Baldwin. It is a philosophical treatise in the form of a poem. We had been comparing it to Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass and Allen Ginsberg's How. These are two of the great poems to the American people, an American possibility. And James Baldwin, the same kind of epic poem, the same kind of, not the same questions, has come to radically different conclusions, where Whitman is talking about American possibility and American opportunity and yada, yada, yada. James Baldwin presents a deep critique. And what Grady is talking, the metaphysical as the teleological, that all of this is claimed. The right to kill somebody like that is rooted in the teleology that is the end game of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny, like whiteness, is an invention of so-called white people to justify them. And what Baldwin says is, and thus they are mad. I think we got another poem we're going to read too, but can I just call on Nanda? Go
Well,
ahead.
I mean, this is kind of going back to our earlier conversations, but I was wondering if anybody's seen if Assad has said something about this, because I know that that Soleimani was also instrumental in keeping Assad, safe from U.S. forces. But the other thing that's been worrying me over the
What Assad?
of Syria.
Oh, yeah.
You do have a quote for it?
He said that the martyr Soleimani died while serving his country in the Axis of resistance. The Syrian people will not forget Soleimani's support for our side defending Syria from terror.
Yeah, but the other thing that I've been thinking about over the last day is the possibility of nuclear war. And, this kind of recklessness that the U.S. Ruling elite has shown. I mean, it just goes to show that they're reckless enough to use nuclear weapons if the opportunity arises. And, we've been talking about how the Iranians are disciplined, but it's the exact opposite here. It's a decadent ruling class
No question.
with no discipline.
May I ask you a question, Nandita, if you don't mind? See, so here we're faced with two possibilities, it seems. Appeasement or immediate action to confront the aggressor. Is that could we put it that way?
I don't know if there
See,
is.
if they say, well, we're so crazy, we'll drop nuclear weapons. That's what, excuse me for using the white man, I know a lot of people don't, but the white man in the game of Manifest Destiny is literally, has said it before. They said it in Vietnam. They said it in Korea. Oh, you gonna push us? You think you're gonna fuck with us? We'll use nuclear weapons. They said this time and again. And they said, oh, you don't think we will? Look at Japan.
Yeah.
So the threat, so how do you, and I agree with you, so how do you confront the threat?
Yeah. I don't know if I have an answer to that. I mean, on the one hand, you also have a changing global situation.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is something that was not there before. This alliance between Russia, China, the fact that they're losing all these wars. So it makes me think whether this can be resolved in a way that does not cause more death, human suffering. And I don't know if maybe this is just a I don't know.
Well, let's consider it. Can we avoid this as a New York Times catastrophic war?
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions coming into today was, like, even with the simulation, I wonder what the deaths were for, like, the Iranian civilians, because the U.S., we won't see it on our soil.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is this just a needed situation that there will be a ton of suffering and death for civilians and, like, U.S. soldiers, which doesn't really matter as much to me because they're going to another country. And so is this just needed for the U.S. to continue to, like, the empire to fall? Or will this just be a situation where there's just like an ongoing war that doesn't really affect day-to-day Americans, and they make like movies about how we're protecting the world, like American Sniper and that bullshit? So I'm just wondering if that's just the way this goes, or if we really do need this to be like a greater, bigger fight where we actually see the thing that should be coming for us for like 50 years.
Let me just say, I know they've already threatened Iran with nuclear weapons. I mean, they ain't going to announce that, hey, we're going, but the way they do. And the Iranians have already have factored that in. And that's a psychological as well as, deaths and so, but I think they have factored that in to the defense of their country, but.
I mean, I also think about that region and the war that it has.
Well, India's not that far from there. Yeah. So, see, but hold on. Let's kind of think this out, because this is a big thing. Because, see, if I can, and I think Munchie we've heard this. It's like, don't force us to use nuclear weapons. It's not like they are the aggressor. Oh, by you fighting, like Vietnam fighting to hold on to its nation, its people. Oh, you gonna force us to? Now, the thing is, the bully, the threat, now, are, okay, this is the big issue. Are they prepared to carry through with the threat? Are they prepared with the intended and unintended consequences of their threats? Now, I just want to, you all might not have heard it, but we've heard this before.